Well, I started instrument making at the age of 12, making a guitar. And then at the age of 16, I started working for Tony Bingham in London, who was a dealer in antique instruments. And from then until 1975, which was at 67 to something like that, 1975, I worked in London and various other places. And then at the age of 25, I went to Cremona and started learning violin making. And in Cremona, I started teaching the arts of restoration, because at that time there were not that many people who knew about restoration of instruments, and I'd already had at least 10 years' experience by that point. I moved to Minneapolis in 1989. Claire Givens and I were married in that year, and I started really moving my business to Minneapolis. And since it's really concerned with historical instruments, the two businesses were perfect to join together. Claire's business in instruments, contemporary instruments for modern players, and mine for historic instruments for museums and for historic instrument players. Well, I really was involved in the fine arts business until 1975, until I went to Cremona. And I was taught by some of the best people in the world for sculpture, particularly in life drawing and casting and things like that. But I quickly learned to be able to carve in wood, and I was often asked to make replacement parts for instruments. And in doing that, I learned how to carve carved heads for viola da gambas and lutes and things like that. And I've made harps and various other things that are all carved. Well, I'm particular because I've had access to a lot of historic instruments. And when players pick up a historic instrument, they always remark on how different an experience it is to play on something that's truly historic. So if I don't use that expertise on the instruments that we restore, it would be something that would be misformed. It would lead the lead the musician astray from where they should actually be in making discoveries in early music. There's a lot of instruments out there that are just purely generic, and that's really not fine enough for the kinds of finesse that you need to play early music. Well, the first thing you'll notice about a properly converted Brock instrument is that the bridge height here doesn't really differ too much from a modern instrument. Sometimes you'll see converted instruments with very low bridges, and that doesn't usually give a very good sound. We have a lot of bridge patterns that we use. This one has the regular Stradivari pattern, but we use this is a different pattern from a German instrument, and we have this is from a Guarneri instrument. This is a later model bridge that's used for classical instruments that I'll talk about in a bit. And then we have a French model bridge. So for each type of instrument, whether it's French, German, or Italian, we use different bridges. That's one thing that you'll notice for something that's properly set up. The other thing you'll notice is the neck form is correct. That is, we use patterns taken from original instruments of this particular kind of neck form. And this is very difficult to get right without proper templates. The other thing, one other thing you'll notice is that we have an ebony-faced tailpiece with bone decoration, which is to match the age of the instrument. And the tailpiece has an applewood core to it. And that is because applewood's very strong and very elastic. The fingerboard has a spruce core with maple edges and an ebony face to match the tailpiece. And the nut is bone. A bone nut is very important for the sound, and it allows the gut strings to slide over very, very easily and stops the strings fraying. And that's a very difficult thing to do, to get the dynamics of the nut exactly correct. The other thing we do is we don't use commercial pegs, and we make our own pegs here in the shop. These are boxwood ones made after an English pattern, and they're appropriate for this kind of instrument. Yes, the other thing you'll notice is that the usual tail wire, which in modern instruments is made of nylon, here is gut, and this is red gut, which is a particular kind of treatment that stops it being affected by perspiration. A bone end button, which is also kind of unusual for modern instruments. They're usually ebony now. And the fitting of the gut, the way that it passes through the tailpiece is different. And because the way it passes through the tailpiece is different, then we have a lower saddle here. And it puts about the same angle to the bridge of the strings as a modern instrument, a tiny bit lower, because the lower angle helps to project a little better with gut strings. One thing I forgot to mention was that this measurement here, which we call the overstand, that is the height that the neck projects over the body of the instrument, in a Baroque instrument is much lower. And I have thought a lot about why this is, but I think it's because the original necks were nailed in place. And if you nail the neck in place, it's not as strong as when the neck is set into the body, which they are on modern instruments. And so this overstand is just a few millimeters for this early date. It gets higher the later you get with these instruments, until by the classical period, when the necks are angled more backwards, that's after 1800, you get a higher overstand and a slightly higher projection on the bridge, because they were using thicker strings for projection in opera orchestras and things like that. Well, I think it's a matter of tools. If you wanted to run a marathon, you wouldn't wear ordinary shoes. And the Baroque music and music of the past, historic music, is actually really interesting. And you need the proper tools to be able to discover all of its intricacies. I think that Baroque instruments just offer much more color. They offer much more possibilities of harmonics than a modern instrument do. When you get when you have experience of playing on a Baroque instrument with a proper bow, it will help you to understand the music much better. And when you understand it, and you understand the phrasing and how difficult it was for those players to produce the particular kind of sound that they were aiming for, then you can go from there to modern music, and that helps you understand modern music better. So it's a matter of a kind of integral study, which includes historic music, that you don't just let historic music by and say, well, that happened in the past and that was then, and now I'm interested in modern music. No, it's a continuum of practice. And you can understand, if you can understand why people like Corelli played and how they played, then you can understand a little bit about how the later players like Paganini played, because they were standing on the shoulders of these players. So if you just start playing modern music and you don't understand all of these dynamics and what you have to do to produce a sound, then you're really nowhere. You don't have that experience, and you can't use it to inform your playing. Thank you so much for visiting the shop today. I look forward to seeing you in the future and to hearing all of your wants and comments and various other things and questions that you might have. We're always happy to answer questions, and always happy to find the perfect instrument for you. And in particular, I'm very happy to make special bows for any of you who need them, and which we do all of the time.